Hello, book babes and busters. I'm Sandra. Today I'm going to be sharing what I read last month in April, as well as my May TBR. I do not plan on reading this many books again in May. I think I read 11 books at least in April, and for the most part they were enjoyable enough, but I feel like a lot of the books I read were kind of a slog. I'm just gonna take it a little bit slower so I can enjoy it. Also, we're going on family beach vacation next month too, so I'm really excited about that. I think a lot of the books that I'm gonna be reading in the near future are gonna be reflective of that. There is one book that I read in April and finished on May 1st. I'm going to go ahead and include it in this video because by the end of this book I was so ready to be done with it, and so I'm just going to talk about it in this video and kind of knock it out of the way so I don't have to talk about it again. So was it a hate read? Probably. But okay, so books I read in April. The first book I read was Happily Never After by Lynn Painter. To put it simply, I was a bit disappointed by the book. It didn't really have any depth to it, particularly character depth. I thought the premise was adorable. The love interest is this professional wedding objector, and he pulls this woman in on it after he takes her own wedding as a job, like a friends to lovers kind of thing that comes from that. The only other thing that I've read by Lynn Painter is Mr. Wrong Number, which I found hilarious and enjoyed probably more, but I also listened to Happily Never After on audiobook too while I was reading an ebook version of it. And what I have found about myself is if I read something primarily on audiobook, I tend to be more critical of the story and rate it lower, and I think that's because it's so much easier for me to tune out the story and get disconnected or detached from the characters. It's like a very obvious trend whenever I listen to an audiobook, so I think that's part of the problem. If there are any audiobook listeners out there, do you find that that tends to be true for you as well? Because when I read something physically myself, I tend to enjoy it more. I don't know if it's because the voices in the audiobook kind of get to me or take me out of it, or it's just too easy for me to get distracted and multitask, but something there is amiss. Happily Never After, I think I gave it 3 stars. It was cute. A lot of people enjoyed it. It was meh for me. And then for the Story Darlings Amazon Book Club, I read Rule of the Aurora King, which I just recorded an episode to discuss that book with Tera over on the Story Darlings podcast. Rule of the Aurora King I enjoyed much more than Trial of the Sun Queen. It was fast-paced. I thought Nadir was a really great swoon-worthy kind of male main character. I really enjoyed the snarky banter and just the feistiness of the relationship between Nadir and Lore. And there were a lot of flashbacks too about this character named Cersei, which I really enjoyed because it finally answered some of those questions that we had in the first book. There's still a lot of questions. The next book, Fate of the Sun King, comes out June 4th, I believe. So I'll be looking forward to reading that one and seeing what closure we get. But I am enjoying the story. It's a romantic-y type of book, and it doesn't require a lot of concentration. It's really fast-paced, it's funny, and then the romance is good in it. So I recommend that one. I think I gave it 4 stars. And then I read The 3-Body Problem, which there's a Netflix adaptation for it, which was fantastic. I have been reading The 3-Body Problem for what feels like a really long time. It is one of those books that requires my full focus because not only is it a translated from Chinese book, but it is also very heavy on the hard science part. It is very descriptive and explaining sound waves and things like that. There's a lot of timeline hopping around and a lot of characters that didn't have distinct voices, and there wasn't a lot of character growth, so that didn't make me attached to the characters themselves. But I found the ideas in the book so cool, probably some of the coolest scenes I've ever read in a book too. It was really cool getting to see those scenes adapted for the Netflix adaptation, specifically the nanofibers in the ship incident and in the virtual reality game with the 3 bodies aligning and gravity being lost. That was really cool. There's just so many cool things. It felt like it was really true to the book, even though there were so many character changes. I think I gave 3-Body Problem 4.25, and it was just because of the reading feeling like a slog to me. And then I read The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo, which was an adult historical fantasy book that she released, and I'm really coming to enjoy Leigh Bardugo's adult fantasy type of books, especially when she branches out and gets more love story put into it. I think she's really good at that. and she always writes it in a very unique way. The Familiar I rated 4.5. Leigh Bardugo's writing is really good. I haven't read anything that's set in Spanish Inquisition Madrid, so that was a very new setting for me. And then I found the story and the characters so richly developed, especially the side characters too. Some of the side characters had really great growth arcs to me. And then the ending is something that people are very divisive about. I liked the ending and thought it was perfect for the story being told, even though it wasn't like a traditional happy ever after kind of thing. So I do recommend that one. Like I said, 4.5 stars. And then I read an author that's new to me, Annabel Monaghan. I read Same Time Next Summer, which this one was interesting because it had the same kind of vibe that I expected, and probably a lot of other people expected Emily Henry's Happy Place to have. And so it felt very much like that aspect of Happy Place meets like Sweet Home Alabama, the movie with Reese Witherspoon. So it had that kind of energy to it and a very sweet romance. It was centered on like a childhood friends to lovers kind of romance. They don't talk for a long time, and then they come back together because of different things happening, like the female main character is getting married to someone that she isn't necessarily aligned with, and so she has some doubts bubbling under the surface, and she kind of meets her childhood boyfriend, her lost love, I guess. And it was a really cute story. I enjoyed it. Like I said, it kind of felt like a Happy Place meets Sweet Home Alabama. And I gave that one 4 stars. It was good. And then I read The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. This is the first book in his library trilogy, which launched last year. And then The Book That Broke the World is book 2, and that one came out last month. This was another book very similar to Three Body Problem, where the reading was kind of a slog because of all the different timeline jumping, the dual POV. It required my focus, and I had this problem with Empire of the Damned by Jay Kristoff recently as well, and Sarah J. Maas's House of Flame and Shadow. Like I said, I've been kind of going through a little slog with these dense kind of fantasy reads that have so much going on, and they're just go the whole time without any breathing room. The Book That Wouldn't Burn, I loved the characters. Like Lyvira is my favorite. She was a very precocious child. She was very savvy and scheming, just very quick on her feet. I enjoyed the premise of, these two characters living in this infinite library and the things that come out of that, and kind of the themes of human nature and resilience and these cyclical destruction of the world over and over from us, not learning our lessons and continuing these conflicts over time. So I really enjoyed that part of it, and I am looking forward to reading book 2 in the near future before the final book comes out early next year, I believe. So The Book That Wouldn't Burn, I rated that one 4.25, I think, and it's one that'll increase in subsequent readings for me. And then I read Funny Story by Emily Henry, which was such a fun read. I think this has become my favorite Emily Henry book, and I loved Book Lovers and Beach Read, but I think Funny Story tops all of those. The character development between not even just the main characters, but the side characters was so good. The dialogue and some of the situational humor was amazing. Like, I was laughing and smiling throughout the entire book. And even the premise of the book, like the ex-fiance of the woman is now dating her roommate's ex-girlfriend, and then they get together. It was just so crazy, but it worked. And it was just a feel-good story. It's one that I would read again and again just because it's so much fun. So I definitely recommend that one if you're looking for a lighter kind of spring, summer, beach read type of thing. And then a couple months ago, I stopped by Two Friends Books in Bentonville, and I picked up The Kiss Quotient by Helen and Hoang. And I went to the library a few weeks ago, and I got the sequel book, The Bride Test. And so I pretty much binged those within 2.5-3 days. It's so good. I think I rated them both 4 stars. The author has said that she is on the autistic spectrum, and she only found this out after she discovered that her daughter was on the spectrum. And so at least the first 2 books in this series, the main characters are both autistic, and I just thought the representation of them was really good. They were both very high functioning, really driven, interesting people with layers to them. And I especially liked, it's Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and I really enjoyed just the cultural influences in the book and some of those nuances. and I liked the familial kind of relationships that were depicted in the book too, because it was definitely something that resonated with my life experience. So I think I rated them both 4 stars. And then I have to talk about my absolute favorite book of the month, and one of my absolute favorite books, period. This is going to be, added to my top 5 favorite books ever, is The Idea of You by Robinne Lee. And this is Robin's debut novel. It came out, I believe, in 2017. It recently got turned into a Prime Video adaptation starring Anne Hathaway and Nicholas Galitzine, and it is such a beautiful movie. There were a lot of character and just plot changes from book to movie that made it more of a rom-com, I think. But this is such a great book, and I feel like men and women both should read it. It's an age gap forbidden kind of romance, but the age gap is with the woman being 20 years older than the man. And the romance in it was so good. The relationship between her and her daughter was amazing. I think the themes around fame and celebrity and toxic fandoms and the impact that has on relationships was really interesting to dig into. And it was just such an incredible book. People either really love it or they hate it because it's not the happiest ending in this book. It's very much a literary fiction kind of novel that dives into pretty interesting themes. For me anyway, because I can relate to the main character quite a bit. So I love this one. This was a 6-star read for me, probably my favorite book of the month. This is the UK edition. If anyone's wondering out there, this does not have the bonus chapter. For that, you have to get the UK movie tie-in edition, which I ordered from Blackwell, so I'm waiting for that to come in this week. So good. Highly recommend this one. And then my hate read. I don't tend to hate read a lot, but I DNF'd this one, I believe, in February or March, and I was like, you know what? I need to get past this book so I can move on to the next Magnolia Parks book. I listened to this one on audio and read the physical version of it, and I'll say that the voice actor for Christian saved the audiobook for me. Even though I found Christian's character in this book so annoying, the voice actor for him was everything, and I loved listening to him speak. So there's that. Where to even begin with this book? It just felt so juvenile. Daisy was annoying. She was like a Magnolia 2.0. All of the other side characters, particularly the men, felt like sex props for Daisy. And then Julian, I absolutely detested his character. He did some things toward the end of the book that I just assassinated his character for me. I didn't like him. I didn't enjoy him whatsoever. He wasn't redeeming for me. And then there was Christian, who was pining after Daisy the entire time, but it was pining in a way that just made him a really whiny character. And by the end of this, I was so sick of being in all of these characters' heads just because they have problems like communicating and just revealing their true feelings. It was so annoying. And the footnotes were getting to me as well. You know, Jessa Hastings Never and Magnolia Parks, it had the footnotes as well, but it was just, I don't know. I think I'm over the footnotes. At first they were like, you know, really quirky and cute and worked, but some of the footnotes in this, I'm just put them in the actual text. But anyway, I don't like to be negative about books, so that's way more negative than I intended to be. So the only good thing that came out of this book to me was Daisy. Thank God, because I did not like him. But that is read now. So at some point, I'll be able to pick up on the next Magnolia Parks book, which is probably the one good positive out of this whole thing. So, sorry about that. Now, what I'm looking forward to this month, for the month of May, I am going to be really just lax with it, really flexible. It is Tera, my Story Darlings counterpart's birthday month, and so I'm going to read 3 books that she's recommended. She has recommended Abby Glines, so my pick, any book by Abby Glines, and then Soraya Wilson, any pick by that author, and then there is a book called Ruthless Night by Ashley Jade that she has been talking about forever. I think it's part of a series, but it's a standalone, so I'm going to pick that one up and read it at some point, just so that, you know, for Tara's birthday I can read books that she loves. Also for the Story Darlings podcast, we are reading The Ever King by L.J. Andrews, so I still need to read that one. We're reading that this week. I've heard great things about that one. And then I know it has a sequel that's out too, so excited about it. And then right now I'm reading an advanced reader copy of I Hope This Finds You Well by Natalie Sue. And this book hooked my attention because it's described as being like an office space or the office kind of setting. I'm about a third of the way through the book right now, and it's very much a satire of just corporate life and employees and their lives and the relationships that we abstain from. And so at times it kind of strikes me as like the tone feels very much like Yellowface by R.F. Hoang, just with that satire. But also it's just so funny. There's some really crazy things that happen in this. And the main character is a 33-year-old. She is Iranian. Her mom is an Iranian immigrant. And so she has no friends. She's not in a relationship. Her living situation isn't ideal. She's been in this job for several years, and she's very dissatisfied. And she has the synopsis of the book is she has been writing her true feelings to people, like responding to them very viscerally in emails, but like she makes the font white so that they don't see it below her professional email to them. But she gets found out, and so there is like behavioral action that is taken and this training that she has to go through to course correct if she wants to keep her job. And so it just kind of snowballs from there. I think there's like a little bit of a love interest with an HR person. And so I'm enjoying it. It is Natalie Sue's debut. And I think the writing can feel a little bit stilted at times. You do get that sense. But I'm enjoying the themes of the book and just kind of the absurd things that are happening. So I'll let you know how that goes. This book is out in early June, I believe. And then I also got approved for an advanced reader copy of a book by Renee Carlino called This Used to Be Us. The only other Renee Carlino book I've read is Swear on This Life. And I think I rated that book like 4 or 4.25 stars. It was a really moving book about these childhood friends that became lovers. One of them grew up to be an author, and the other one is kind of in this dead-end relationship, and they get connected again in the future and just kind of that stuff. And it's a lot of like very traumatic childhood past things that they experienced growing up in Ohio. And I really liked that, and I thought it was an emotional read. I'm really excited to read this book, This Used to Be Us. I will give that a read in the next couple weeks and then report back. I think it's out like early July. And then there's King of Sword and Sky, which this book has been out for years and years by C.L. Wilson. Avon Books is re-releasing the trade paperbacks for this with new editions. So like, you know, here's the second book in the Tairen Soul series that just came out. So this week, King of Sword and Sky just came out on trade paperback with the new cover, and I'm waiting on my pre-order to come in, and then I will probably sit down and give that a read. My goal is to read all of Tairen Soul by July so that I can then talk about the entire series as a whole with my friend Jessa over at Tiaras and Books, and she does the Gym Was Cancelled Buffy cast. I'm excited to read that one and talk about it soon. And then I've been so behind on my library borrows, like I'm failing. I had to return a couple books that I just didn't have time to read, and then I just have books expiring left and right on my Kindle. But one that has been sitting there for a little bit is The Buccaneers by Edith Wharton. And a couple months ago, Sam, at Sam Reads a Little over on Instagram, she shared that she was watching the Buccaneers adaptation on Apple TV Plus, and so I binged it as well. I really enjoyed the show and the drama of it. I enjoyed the setting. I have been really curious to pick up the books and see how they hold up to the show. It's my understanding that Edith Wharton passed before this book was completed, so it's kind of like finished by another author or something like that. It'll be interesting to see what I take. I'm not familiar with any of her books, but I really did enjoy the adaptation. And then I've been doing so much book shopping lately, and I've picked up a lot of general fiction novels and some nonfiction, and I really need to start making a dent in those book stacks at some point. So I'm thinking about maybe just doing a vote. I'll put up a handful of books on there and just vote on which one you think I should read. So I might do something like that. We will see how that goes. Yeah, I feel like I've been talking and talking and talking. So I'm gonna cut this video off now. So I hope you enjoyed seeing what I read in the month of April and what my plans are for May reading. Definitely let me know if you've read any of these, if you disagreed, if you agreed, and what you're reading this month too, so I can see if maybe I want to pick that one up too. Drop me a book stack emoji because all the books, all the time. Okay, I will see you next week. All right, bye.